Well, in the list I find already Dipanjan Ghosh, Shongita Dhimat, Shumita Datto. Well, the list of presenters that I received, Shongita Dhimat uh, comes first.
Hello,
Well,
sir. Can you hear me? I'm Mrs. Sandeep Pujay.
yes, Shongita Dhimat. Now I tell you all of you,
Yes, sir.
all those who will present today,
Hmm.
I tell you that you must finish your presentation within 8 minutes. Since there are 12 listed
Okay.
already, I don't know how many of you will ultimately uh, attend. So I start with Sangeeta Dhimat. Um, yes,
Okay, sir.
please start your presentation and complete it within 8 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Please
sir.
go.
May I share my PPT?
Yes, 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 of course,
Hello.
of course.
Uh, Wait a bit, sir. I'll just start sharing my screen.
Yes, your topic is contrast between African and British culture in Once Upon a Time by Gabriel Okara.
That's my topic.
Yes,
Just
okay.
give me 2 minutes.
Yes, we can see it. Yes, madam, please start your presentation. Yes, madam, please start your speech. Your microphone is mute. Shangita Dhimat, Madam, your microphone is mute. Please unmute your microphone. Madam Sangita, please unmute your microphone. Madam, you cannot be heard.
Yes, sir. Am I audible now?
Yes,
Hello, sir.
yes,
Am I audible
yes,
now?
yes.
Okay,
Now
sir.
you are audible.
So,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, sir. So, I'll start my presentation now. The topic for my presentation is contrast between African and British culture in Once Upon a Time by Gabriel Okara. I am Mrs. Sangeeta Sunil Dinte, Assistant Professor of English from Padma Shri Vikhe Patil College, Loni, Ahmednagar District, Maharashtra. First of all, let's talk about Gabriel Okera. Gabriel Okera is one of the first modern African poets and novelists. He was born on 24th April 1921 in Nigeria. He is considered as a highly original writer who was uninfluenced by other poets. The traditional African person who loves myths and folklore. He represents the moods, attitudes, sounds, and sights of Africa. Gabriel Okera's writings were mainly concerned with the theme of clash between the ancient African culture with modern Western culture. In his famous novel, The Voice, he has reflected on this tradition and transition period during the after the independence of Africa. His poetry is filled with energy, sensible, and meaningful. Gabriel Okara's Once Upon a Time is selected for my presentation. Poem is a pathetic plea from his the speaker of the poem is the father who wants to ask his son that his fake personality to forget it and to relearn from his youngster how to laugh and be genuine. He wanted to regain his lost innocence and purity. Now let's talk about the title. The title is Once Upon a Time. This title is a typical beginning of a fairy tale. Usually the fairy tale begins with once upon a time there lived a king and a queen and things like that. So this poem starts with this title. Once Upon a Time is the title, and so we, the readers, believe that the speaker is going to tell us a story. In this poem, he regrets the loss of the ancient culture once upon a time. In the past, the ancient culture of Africa was full of loving, caring, and genuine attitude. So he yearns to gain that life back. The structure of the poem is composed in a free verse. It is written by first person, I, the narrator. Autobiographical narrative style is in this poem. It is divided into seven stanzas and it has a mirror-like structure. The first three stanzas, they portray the childhood and innocence. The next three stanzas, they show the degradation of a person when he grows up, when he shows manhood and experience. So this poem moves backward and rejoices in the glorious past. It also uses the flashback technique for cinematic effect. Then let's talk about the composition of the poem. This poem was composed after the independence of Nigeria. The influence of West culture on the lifestyle of the African people could be felt in this poem. It talks about the artificial and mechanical manners which were there when the Britishers ruled over Africa. So the rulers have given their manners and etiquette to these African people. Then the sincerity, love, innocence, and genuine feelings, which was the main ingredient of the African culture, was lost. Then the materialistic Western influence, due to its attack, the past life, the serenity, the peacefulness of the Africans has changed into something which they don't like. That is the false politeness, deception, money mindedness, and manipulation crept in the African culture. So the African culture was influenced by the British culture, and the poet wants to show this contrast through this poem. The theme of the poem is regret for the loss of open-hearted nature and caring attitude. The poet feels nostalgic and he rejoices in the past of genuine, warm, and sincere feelings which were present in the African people. Now it is replaced by the cold, superficial, and hostile behavior which is considered as sophisticated behavior, but which is not the real nature of the people. The contrast between the past African ways of life and the modern Western mannerism is aptly portrayed in this poem. In the first stanza of the poem, the poet begins in a nostalgic mood. He remembers the sincere behavior of people. Once upon a time, people used to laugh with their hearts and eyes. True affection was there between people. They don't make show of outward things, which is now in vogue. In today's materialistic world, outward teeth laugh without understanding the speaker's real self is done. Even the eyes are ice block cold eyes. This is the phrase used by Gabriel Okera to suggest the coldness of heart, mind, and the inner hatred for each other. The second stanza talks about the custom of shaking hands. So mechanical handshake is again one of the impact of the artificial British manner. Shaking the right hand with the other person, but at the same time, the persons are searching the pockets with the left hand. So this suggests the intended intentions, that is, they wanted to know if the person who is in front of them is a rich fellow, if he is having some social status. But when they understand that this person is not like that, their behavior changes. In the third stanza, the poet talks about this change in behavior. When a person goes to visit his friends or relatives, people invite as a formality, and they even exchange the nice things. They say, feel at home, come again. But this behavior is completely changed when they come to know about the real condition of this person. If the person is poor and without any social standing, then they close doors upon him. The sophisticated people, they turn out to be hypocrites. In past, they used to welcome the strangers also. In the African culture, they used to offer even food, drink, and free lodging generously to the strangers also. But nowadays, no one wants to open their doors for the other persons. They consider it as an attack on their privacy. So they do not want to allow anyone to enter their house, and their sphere of privacy should not be broken. In this way, they have adopted the British traditions and ways of living, which is hollow and fake, and it has the impact of industrialization. They behave completely different according to the different situations. Then the fourth stanza adapts. The poet also starts to adapt himself to fit this showy world. He uses symbol of many faces. Many faces means a modern man acts like an actor. He wears faces like dresses. As we change our dresses, he change his facial expressions. The home face is different from the office face. It is different from the street face. The host face is different. The cocktail face is different. It means that according to the situation and relations, these must change. But the smile remains as it is, like a fixed portrait smile. It is a fake smile. The person does not greet others sincerely. So that fake smile is again the impact of British culture, and the African culture, the warmthness of feelings has lost. Then the fifth stanza In that also, we can see the expressions like goodbye. Goodbye means God be with you. But now, when a person leaves their house, the people used to say good riddance, and they are very happy that the person has gone away. They have got rid of that person. In this way, they have lost connection with the natural, heartfelt communication. The speaker, who is the father, who is telling this to his son, he wishes to be near to God with purity of mind, heart, and soul, like his son. He desires to be innocent and devoid of artificial sophistication which is imposed by the British culture. Even though Britishers have left Africa, their impact could be felt in the behavior and manners of the African people. Then the smile in the mirror, when the poet sees his own image in the mirror, and when he sees his smile, the smile is just a fake laugh. It, the teeth seems to be like the fangs of a snake without any real sensations. He seems to be overtly pleasant. He wanted to show that I am happy, I welcome you, but that smile is not a real smile. It is dangerous and deceitful smile. The symbol of thanks is used by Gabriel Okera to suggest poisonous, shameless disguise. It is also considered to be the first scene of disobedience of man due to the impact of Satan, who comes in the form of a snake in the dream of Eve and who tells her to disobey God and eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge and ignorance, which was told by the God not to eat. So in this way, the Western materialistic civilization has also affected the Africans. And the last stanza, the sixth stanza, the father appeals his son to teach him to emote. Now, how to emote? To laugh with heart, to show genuine behavior, not to hate himself for being a selfish person. He again goes back to his golden past in his childhood when he was very innocent, sincere, and enthusiastic. He wanted to get back his lost identity and genuine personality. The father wants to unlearn the Western modern influence and he wants his son to help him to be happy by teaching him how to be innocent, caring, loving, and how to change the attitude and emotions. Now, the last part, the concluding session, the effect of the intermingling of the traditional African culture with the Western materialism. As we all know, that Britishers has ruled over majority part of the world. In Asia also, on our country, India also, the Britishers ruled. So, we have adopted their language, their culture, their ways of dressing, their ways of behaving. So, this impact is felt on the African culture also. The memories of the golden past are there in his mind and heart. He wanted to become emotional, loving, caring, sincere, and honest as he was once upon a time in his past. The modern capitalism has corrupted man. It has made him a complete beast. Man are only after money and he ignores all the other feelings which are related to the emotions, the heart. He thinks about money only and he mistreats the poor people. The hypocrisy and the constant manners of the adult are shown in this poem, and the desire to be honest, to be spontaneous like a child is expressed here. Then, the concluding remarks, the poet desires to relearn the innocence and sincere manners from his young son. He wishes to follow the example of honest and genuine child. He wanted to become original, real self. He wanted to regain his real self. So, the poem exemplified Wordsworth's quotes. child is the father of man. As we all know, that child, the innocent being, teaches us to be, to become good, to behave nicely with others. So this poem also teaches the same thing. So thank you very much for your kind listening.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Shangita. Uh, now I ask the other participants, would you like to ask any question to her? Dhimat, Sangita, Sunil, assistant professor.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I'm asking the other participants. Would you like to ask any question to her?
Okay, sir.
Sunita, Shumita, or Dipanjan Ghosh? Would you like to ask anything?
Thank you, madam,
Okay.
Dr. Shangita Dhimate, for the excellent presentation, madam. Very comprehensive, clear cut, and the contrast that you have drawn. Madam, I would just like to know that in your analysis, you have talked about the framework, the social structure. So you find the difference in the social
Yes.
structure as a cause. Just elaborate a bit on this, madam, please.
Okay. The social structure of the African society. So, in the beginning, in the ancient era, the African society was just like our Indian society. It has the joint family structure, and the people used to have very nice, good relations even with their neighbors and the other villagers. They used to stay together and they used to care for each other. They used to show their respect, love for others. They were of helpful nature. They even offered food, drink, and lodging free of cost to strangers also. So their relationship was very good with each other. They were like a family. The total tribesmen or the villagers were like a family. But with the modern influence of industrialization and the British culture, they have changed their behavior, and now they wanted just to make show of being nice, but in their heart, in their mind, they are not pure human beings, and they mistreat the poor people. They only give respect to the rich people who are having some social status, and they wanted to gain something from others, so they have become selfish. uh, uh, am I clear, sir?
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for your response.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Madam.
sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shorkar. Now I request the next participant. Dipanjan Ghosh is with us from the beginning. His topic is Wool Soinka's Dance of the Forests. Uh, Dr.
Hello, sir. Am I
Dipanjan?
audible?
Yes. Uh,
Okay.
I
Good
request
afternoon,
you.
all.
Yes.
Yes, sir. The title of this particular topic is, or this paper is, Ole Soinka's The Dance of the Forests is Crime, Punishment, and Redemption. The play, A Dance of the Forests. Okay, should I begin with the that is the video part?
Yes, you may.
Okay, sir. Okay, so now I can begin. Yes. So the play The Dance of the Forest was produced on the Nigerian Independence Day. The fundamental focus of this particular play was on the symbolic amalgamation of past, present, and future, as you can see. At one hand, the play underscores the Nigerian War of Independence, and at the other, it focuses on different levels of crimes and scenes that came as an aftermath of colonialism, obviously. Eldred Durasimi Jones, as he remarks, A Dance of the Forests presents a comprehensive view of man over a massive span of history. And he continues, it is an attempt to represent the complexities of human personality and its consequences within the cyclical pattern of history. It is remarked by Eldred Durasimi Jones in the page 32. Here in this particular play, These complexities of human personality are presented through various maxims. As we can find here, the forest is the human mind, the richest source of allegory. Actually, I'm quoting from Gopala Krishnan, and these are presented through various maxims. As I pointed out, that the forest is the human mind, the richest source of allegory. Generations come together, representing the past, present, and the future. Gods and spirits are symbolic projections of human values and attitudes. The communion among different levels of existence has been done in this particular play through ritualistic ceremonies. Like in the particular play, we can find there are particular names have been given. The first one is gathering of the tribes, and the second one is obviously is the welcome of the dead. Now, so to identify different levels of sins and crimes within the people and the society by extension, we need to analyze the text and its various symbolic implications. Soyinka's Christian upbringing, as we can find that from the biographical parts, at home, and deep respect for Saint Peter, it has been marked by Gopala Krishnan in his essay. This particular reference to his association, or maybe the respect for Saint Peter, it actually led him to commingle both Christian ethics and Yoruba culture in this particular play. It is the three terms that I have mentioned in the title of this particular play. It is the crime, punishment, and redemption. They actually recur in Christian scriptural sources, as you can find, including the Holy Bible. Okay, so though in a different orientation, the play also centers around these terms. And this particular paper, as it has been given by me, it actually aims at connecting the terms with the play A Dance of the Forests. Now, the setting of the play, before I go into the particular section that actually brings with the scenes and various kinds of punishments that have been provided in this particular play, let me begin with the setting of this particular play. It actually moves in and out of a flexible stage, which has no scenic landscaping detail or acts in divisions. The spatial dimension is flexible, and the setting changes as the play moves on with the linguistic references rather than concrete stage properties. Arani, as we find from the text, Arani, the narrator, in the opening section gives a testimony that the characters called the forest dwellers to live in the forest. They're waiting for the human community of the town dwellers for the gathering of the tribes. The first part of the play is almost symbolic. It begins in this particular fashion. I'm reading from the text. It is in the page number 7 of the text, and I'm using, it is Ole Soyinka Collected Plays, Volume 1, it's from the Dance of the Forest. An empty clearing in the forest. Suddenly the soil appears to be breaking, and the head of the dead woman pushes its way up. Some distances from her, another head begins to appear, that of a man. Actually, these are referring to the dead man and the woman. As you can find that they have been related with the past and so. The spectators are suddenly transported into some supernatural, mysterious, even horrific world of sinister happenings. Like the witches, as we find in Macbeth, obviously. They assume human shape and speak like the weird sisters too. The significance of the dead in Yoruba art, culture, life, myth, religion, it gets revealed through this particular play also. The play takes into account the Yoruba myth of coexistence of the living and the dead. The descendants of the dead are the living, and they form an integral part of the human community. Thus, the dead man and the woman are invited to participate in the ritual called the gathering of the tribes. They are not invisible supernatural characters. They interact with living and introduce their narratives of the past. In Yoruba culture, as you can find, that the mountains, hills, rivers, forests are divinities coexisting with the living and the dead. For example, the festivals also are an integral part of Yoruba life, celebrated in honor of Ifa. That is July, this particular month has been considered to be related with Ifa, and Orun, that is O-R-U-N, that is the January. In all the festivals, processions and performances take place. The dead man and the woman participate in this procession, and Soyinka's play is modeled on the New Year festival, that is March, a festival in which the villages and towns take part in communal purification rites. This particular term is important. I will come to that later, that because it is the matter of purification, and my title of my paper is crime, punishment, and redemption. So therefore, a particular purification is obviously important here. The participants help each other to confess their sins, and through a ritualistic purgation of these sins, rejuvenation of life begins afresh. Now, in this particular play, we can find the same actually happening. The Yoruba treat their ancestors and with great respect. Rituals are offering to the ancestors. Yoruba people believe that their ancestors became demigods after death and return to the world of the living. to guide mankind with oral records of the past. As we can find that it is the same kind of thing that we also find in our religion, that is in Hindu religion, Muslim and Christian too, because Bhut Chaturdashi, that in Bengali we call actually, there also we consider that the persons from the past, they will come to us, and it's Shab-e Barat in case of the Muslims and All Souls Day in case of the Christians. Also, while we actually gone through Riders to the Sea, there was a kind of a reference to Samhain. Probably there are a kind of a similarity between all these things. Sorry. The earth is seen as the home of the ancestors' remains. The ritualistic offerings made to earth are seen as an honor to the dead, or rather dead, with a symbolic comfortable home. The traditional religion, under the impact of Islamic and Christianic culture, because as you can find in the typical section of this Nigeria, we can find that the Islamic and Christian both actually decide in a particular kind of a balance. This has undergone change through assimilation. Soyinka uses this transitional religion as a metaphor for the strategy of human beings coping with the vast unknown, obviously. For example, in this particular text, there is a reference to Rola. Rola makes it clear that the gathering of the tribes is an occasion when many old and forgotten relations came to celebrate. Now, let us look at on the different patterns of scenes and crimes, because it is the primary focus of this particular paper mentioned in this particular play. On the individual level, there are ample references of the scenes, and also we can find the different kinds of scenes have been incorporated in this particular play. So at the individual level, the primary focus is vested on three major characters in the play. One, it is Dimoki, the carver, and he was the court poet at the court of Mata Kharibu, as we can find. Rola, the courtesan, and she was the Madame Tortoise at the court of Mata Kharibu. And Adenebi, the council auditor, and he was the historian at the court of Mata Kharibu. Now, Dimoke, in spite of being the minion of Ogun, having so much talent of a carver within, is possessed by envy. Now, this is a kind of a scene, obviously. In both of his lives, there are two particular references of the lives have been taken. In both of his lives, he became the sole cause for the deaths of his apprentice. He confesses his sin to Obanezi. Now, I'm reading from this particular text, which is in the page number 19 and 20, where he confesses, I took part in it. I'm reading, I'm quoting from these lines, actually. I am a slave to heights. You see, I can go so far, so high, but one step further than that, and I am seized with dizziness, where my hands are burning to work, where my hands are trembling to mold. My body will not take me. So now it's a kind of an open confession. Similar was in the case of his past existence, where the apprentice dies while catching the canary bird for Madame Tortoise from the slope of the roof of the palace. It also indicates the crime of his old self. So it is the crime, or rather seen at the individualistic level. Evil instincts reappear through ages, as we can find. Mata Kharibu, Madame Tortoise, or the court historian, all are just names of different types of exploiters, as you can see. Now, I'm quoting Gopala Krishnan. He writes that the exploited warrior, okay, that means the dead man actually in the present scenario, the exploited warrior being forced into launching a war over a trifle is the harassed common man who loves peace and would fight only if it is called for. He is the eternal victim. This particular thing is very important. In Dimoki alone, we trace both negative and positive aspects to be present, just like us, the human being. We are also suffering from the positive and negatives, and a kind of a turmoil is always we are in. The final play within the play, in the court of Mata Kharibu, is a time travel into a world 8 centuries ago. This particular shift in the temporal dimension from the present to the past, from the woods to the court, is a symbolic journey. The historian Adenebi, he persuades Mata Kharibu to punish the reluctant warrior. He even reminds the ruler that only war can make time immemorial. He instigates him to declare war and to punish those who oppose the just war. In this section, the dead woman enters leading the half-child by the hand. We find a change of scene. The court is replaced by the damp and drizzling atmosphere as the interpreter masks the three humans. The masks were the expression of a kind of a resigned passivity, to be specific. Each character is related to the corresponding spirit. When the spirit of the palm speaks, the half-child turns around. The spirit of darkness, the spirit of the precious stones, the pachyderms, rivers, sun, volcanoes, earth emerge on the stage. The final dance in the forest is a ritualistic communal experience that brings together a number of spirits along with the living and the dead. The forest father performs a symbolic role and delivers a long speech about the futility of trying to teach humans the folly of their deeds. To expiate these scenes, Demoke climbs the totem pole and is convinced that he will spin off the pole to his death. As the ritual ends, the players ask each other about the significance of the performance. Demoke, who is rescued by Ogun as he falls from the tree, is unable to explain what he has learned from the gathering of the tribes. As the dance becomes more frenzied, the tree is set into fire. The participants purge their scenes but fail to derive any lessons from history. The failure of the artist, historian, orator, counselor, even the dead man and the dead woman becomes perceptible. The open-ended nature of the play makes it a dialectical one. The warrior addressed the physician by stating, unborn, I'm quoting again from the text, it is in page number 49, unborn generations will be cannibals. They will eat up one another. The prophecy was true. When the warrior revisits as the dead man, he finds his successor becomes cannibal under different guises. Now, cannibalism is obviously something symbolic. Soinka felt that the day will surely come when tyranny will be questioned. Gopalakrishnan writes, I'm quoting, Mata Kharibus are reborn in every generation under different names, exercising their tyranny over nations. They have historians to flatter them. They urge them to path of destruction. But the characters like the warrior will remain there in the country for the positive future to come. In his chapter titled The Cosmic Dance, A Dance of the Forest, Gopalakrishnan remarks, I'm quoting again, the theme of the play centers around the African concept of rites of passage, RITES, which means that no man can pass directly from one state of life to the next without passing through a transitional phase. Now, this is the typical kind of a transitional phase that I must suggest here. There is a kind of a reference that is coming to my mind at this moment. Probably it is Dante's Inferno and Purgatorio, and the rivers, Lide and Unoi, and the transition, and then only the cleansing can be possible. It was also mentioned by T.S. Eliot in Holloman. So the purgation of scenes was essentially needed to cross the barrier and enter into a newer state. Whether it is with Demoke or the Nigeria, the redemption had to come through purification only. So Demoke is also referring to Nigeria. But the presence of the half-child in the scheme of the action introduces another similar character drawn from Yoruba myth. This half-child represents the futility of dream, deformed fertility, and the destruction of the African life by the cruel forces of colonialism. Similarly, the presence of the dirge man and Agbareko bring into the dramatic scope the presence of figures of Yoruba myth. By requesting the living to provide sufficient room to dance, the dirge man makes it clear that the dead man and the woman have more importance than the living could confer. The dancer's acolyte, and the dirge man need more room for the dead. In part 2 of the play, there is a second part. Murit reviews the power of nature as a malign one. Ishur wants to know whether the human beings have spoiled too much of the forest by their greed, and then prophesies that on the ceremonial day, the forest will fight back, just like Empire fights back or rather rides back. So Murit acknowledges that the forest will claim its own victims. Ishuro is furious at the way the humans have destroyed the forest and calls for justice. The totem pole carved by Demoke as a symbol of liberty or independence, or as an artifact epitomizing the achievements of society and culture, is regarded the centerpiece of human vulgarity, quoting, that is quote unquote, okay, by Ishuro. So apart from the concept of sin or crime at the individual level, now there is a second part, that is if we focus at the collective level, we find in the play there are ample reference to the environmental plunder that is very serious and very problematic. and probably we are facing at this very moment now also the same kind of thing, the environmental plunder and the fighting. And at the present scenario, that means the COVID crisis, we can find that as if each and every moment we're actually thinking that whether the nature is actually preventing us from such kind of, quote unquote progress. And so this eco-critical angle of the text focuses at the progresses of economy by destroying nature. The presence of a tree demon in the shape of Murid relates the land of the forest to the folkloric traditions, cultures that are integrated with ecology and environment and preserved from the contamination of scientific cultures, believe in such personified presence of natural elements. The tree here signifies the role nature plays in establishing a sustainable human life. The cultural ecology and various folk cults combine in this play to represent belief patterns and thought situations. Rites, rituals are connected with human communities living with close relationships with their natural surroundings. The forest father is asked for illustrious ancestors so that the living characters can draw lessons from history and legends. In Soinka's
So, Professor Ghosh, hello.
hello,
Professor Ghosh, I'm afraid I can't allow you more time.
so 2 minutes more.
Okay.
Okay. So in Soinka's play, accusers are sent by the forest father to interact with the living. The symbolic significance of a tree in the play differs from the personifications of tree seen in the Western drama. In Soinka's play, the tree is a deity that even walks on the stage. Offerings are made and to tribute to the tree. Now, the destruction of the ecology that I have pointed out in Soinka's play is presented through the symbolic mode. Dimoke is the carver, is assigned the task of carving the commemorative landmark on the occasion of the gathering of the tribes. He refers to the task as a divine one, as commissioned by God. The totem pole is carved out of a living araba tree. Dimoke confesses his sin that the accidental death of his apprentice is actually the result of an inexplicable crime. Dimoke confesses that he pushed Oremole off the totem pole. He has committed another sin of trimming the araba tree and cutting off the head of the tree to carve the totem pole. This confession brings forth the repressed sin that is present against man and nature. Dimoke is dissatisfied with his own creativity when he finds actually that the surrounding of the totem pole are cleared by the community and converted into the concrete blocks. Ishuro helps Dimoke in this particular carving of the totem pole, but is conspicuously vengeful. The ecological destruction, as I pointed out, and due to the time constraint, I cannot move to the further extent. This ecological destruction is also being presented here by a passenger lorry, and as we know, the name chimney of Ereko. Yes, so Adenabe regards this as a vehicle smoking like perpetual volcano. The very sight of the lorry creates a sense of repulsion among the forest dwellers. In the play, we find the presence of another nature symbol. There is a palm tree is also being there. That is, I'm not going with that. But at the end, I must say that the ecological destruction brought by colonial exploitation is given a symbolic form. In the play, the virtual life blood, the palm wine, has been shown turning red. The spirit of darkness predicts the irredeemable future by describing shutters of leaves and the close down on doomed and naked heads. The spirit of precious stones mark the exploitation in mines. The spirit of pachyderms mark the ivory turning red while bleeding. The tears of pity also turn red. The ant leader, the workers remain unrecognizable even to the forest head. Their father, they even declare their sacrifice while preparing for the foundation of the country. All show the deterioration in the every aspects of life. Now, I will conclude, obviously, here that every generation, with the Gopalakrishna's comment actually, so every generation witnesses the same drama of the common man being victimized by the power mongers who misled him throughout, giving him the impression that martyrdom for the sake of better future is the greatest achievement one can hope for. The ants have been sacrificed all along for the good to come. The good actually never comes. Finally, to conclude, it should be mentioned that in the play, all the crimes have been marked overtly, where the punishments are hinted with the aid of symbols and allegories. But so far as the possibility of redemption is concerned, it depends on the conscious awareness of people in general. Only the introspection can bring the possibility of regeneration and chastening. That is the fundamental focus that I am going to tell here. That I will end this specific discussion with a quote from Eldred Durachnami Jones. He writes that although a particular geographical and social setting is selected for that amounts to a trial, it is important to remember that it is not just Nigerian man who is under the examination, but the Homo sapiens as a whole. the use of gods and spirits, the backward plunge into history, as well as the peering into the future with the aid of possessed humans, all continue to give the play an archetypal quality and an application broader than any confining parcel of space and time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ghosh. A very informative presentation. In your title, the three things are there: crime, punishment, and redemption.
Yes.
Now, the concept of redemption in African culture, is it in any way different from the Christian concept of redemption?
I don't think so, sir. Actually, the redemption, it is the cleansing of the soul, and when you can be associated with the greater world. That I do think about or consider about redemption. And in Christianity, the particular concept of redemption, obviously the terminological differences are there, but ultimately redemption means when we have got cleansed, our souls have got cleansed. So these particular cleansing perspectives are always there. The processes are different maybe, but the ultimatum is always the same, I think.
Okay, thank you. Now I ask the other participants. Would you like to ask him any question? Dr. Sharkar or Shumita or Professor Dhimat? Anybody else? Well, if there is no other question, we shall move over to the other speakers. Let us see who is in the list. Well, Dr. Anjan Dasgupta is there.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So I would like to make my presentation through a PPT, and please let me know whether you are able to see the screen. Just give me a second so that I can
Okay.
make the presentation. Right, so. So is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, just a minute. I think it is now.
No, we don't see anything.
Just give me a second.
Now, have you clicked the presentation button?
Yes, I have actually. I have.
And thereafter, you have to click the center of the screen.
The center of the screen. I've done your entire screen.
Achha. But we don't see anything. Sorry.
Okay, just a minute. Something must be wrong. I have to, I think, do the video part also. Otherwise, I'll do the normal. This I'll take 30 seconds. Otherwise, I'll give a normal presentation. Just 1 minute. Is my screen visible now? The screen. I think it is visible now.
Actually, you are visible, but not your presentation.
Not my presentation. Okay. Could anyone give me a suggestion what to do? I mean, I think I've mixed this
Yes,
up.
if it is not possible for you to,
No.
there may be a technical problem.
But why?
Well, yes, please carry on reading.
Yes, I'll just go to my PPT then. The PPT which I prepared with some effort, so I don't know why I am unable to show it to you. No, I think I won't waste further time. The title of my paper is Interpreting African Myths in the Famished Road, Wizard of the Crow, Akata Witch, Zoo City, and Children of Blood, Distortion of Reality and Fantasy. This is my presentation. What I have tried to do in this paper is I have tried to select 5 different examples of fantasy literature, which are based on a whole gamut of themes, exploring African culture, myth, folk, beliefs, totems and taboos, and religious ideologies, which I will try to discuss. Now, before that, we must try to define what is fantasy, and that is not a very easy task. If we look randomly at a few definitions that critics have offered on fantasy, we shall be able to appreciate the problematic of these definitions and also see how very inadequate the definitions are in the context of cognitive and linguistic theory. So, Otto Fry adds that fantasy transcends the limits of the naturally possible and morally acceptable. Transcendence is indeed a very vague qualifier, but the term naturally possible is significant. Um, Ian Foster encapsulates the ambiguity about fantasy and fantastic representations by referring to another place, but they have always presumably evoked in the narrative. He therefore defines it as a band of light that is intimately connected with the time, character, logic, or derivatives in the novel at one place and patiently illumes all the problems, and another place shoots over and through them as if they do not exist. So I will try to go into the discussion directly by just giving a very brief definition of fantasy and see how it operates in the texts I've chosen. Fantasy is a very deliberate manipulation or distortion of realistic signifiers. Fantasy, it is understandable, will be very close to a child system as they love to imagine beyond the ordinary. The world which defies rational explanations, but it appears to be paradigmatic in Foster. I will try to demonstrate that fantasy in this text is made up not of out and of the world transcendent something, but a very distinct kind of narrative or language game, as Wittgenstein would have suggested, and that such game strategy contradicts and, to our mind, rectifies erroneous perceptions of the proponents of the last century. The narrator acts as an accomplice of the reader, that is to say, projects the narrator's self as either notionally inferior or less predictable or serious than the reader whom he or she addresses, and manipulates the child's imagination or the adult imagination of the real by shock, by introduction of tropes, imagery, horror, suddenness, mystery, and order, wonder, and by transference of epithets. So they evoke fantasy by manipulating the sense of reality by calculated strategies. The narrator creates the magic with words, terms, terminology that are not of in normal parlance. The world is the other world, one which I have called the parareal. The entire narrative is carried forward by the rules of the other world, the typical, even typological substitutions of the normal world. In fact, the ideas of normal and abnormal, real and unreal, are taken for a toss time and again in these texts. My first text is The Famished Road by Nigerian author Ben Okri, written from the perspective of an Abiku, a spirit child, who can travel to the spirit world while living in our reality. The reader is taken for a toss between the real and unreal, as it were. Okri strategically gives to the spirit world a location, a stature, and certain features. He situates them in a locale and habitat exclusively their own. When he distinguishes between the spirit world and the real world, he suddenly attempts to give to his fantasy a very real ambience. This is what I would like to term as distortion of the real. The spirit child can travel to the spirit world while living in the real world. In his pervasiveness, he suddenly develops a heteroglottic framework and prepares us for many polyphonic exchanges that can be envisaged in the framework in the Bakhtinian scheme of things. Uh, People can relate to these descriptions as real and engage in a reading in which polyphonic exchanges create a world of magic and wonder deeply imbued in African culture and myth. We have animist realism, African African traditionalism, and the or realism, and the coexistence of spiritual and material worlds. As Abiku is disturbed by the siblings of the other world, he is approached by the owner of a local bar and is implored by his father to be a boxer. It's a brilliant text, of course, the details can't be discussed right now, and the two different worlds are laid before us, interchangeable, exchangeable. Published in 2006, Wizard of the Crow by popular Kenyan writer Ngugi Wa Thong, wizards and magic galore all wrapped up in the framework of the myths. The author is the accomplice narrator who consciously fixes your imagination by distorting the traditional norms of reality and standard sizes as they might be present in reality. We have magic operating in the framework of myths. Fantasy and satire coalesce upon the legacy of colonization, not only perpetuated by native discretion, but else. The third book in consideration is Akata Witch by Niji Okorafor. He sets up Akata Witch in the African country with juju, knives, spirit faces, and Nigerian festivals, exploration of fantasy. It is a very insightful search of African culture, born in New York but living in Aba, Nigeria. The 12-year-old Sunny is understandably a little lost. She is albino and thus incredibly sensitive to the sun. All Sunny wants to do is to play football and get through another day of school without being bullied. But once she befriends Orlu and Chichi, Sunny is plunged into the world of the leopard people, where your worst defect becomes your greatest asset. Together, Sunny, Orlu, Chichi, and Shasha form the youngest ever Oha Coven. Their mission is to track down Black Hat Dr. Otto, the man responsible for kidnapping and maiming children. Sunny is able to overcome the killer with powers stronger than her own, or will the future she see the flames become reality. Fantasy is used creatively. Once more, we find the magical powers almost in a Harry Potter vein, where they are swapped for reality, and reality is swapped for the normal. The Zoo City is set up in an alternate version of the South African city of Johannesburg, in which people who have committed the crime are magically attached to an animal familiar. Those who receive such punishment are said to be animaled. The novel's chief protagonist, Zinzi December, is a former journalist and recovering drug addict who was animal to a sloth and after getting her brother killed. He lives in the Johannesburg suburb of Hillbrow, which is nicknamed Zoo City in the novel for its large population of animal refugees and the dispossessed. Zinzi is attempting to repay the financial debt she owes a drug dealer by charging people for a special skill in finding lost objects, as well as making use of her writing abilities by drafting 419 fraud emails. The book's plot focuses on Zinzi's attempts to find the missing family member of brother and sister Poop due for a music producer in return for the money she needs to fully repay her debts. The real and unreal worlds are interchangeable and swapped consciously. The last book that I would like to discuss is Children of Blood and Bone. It exploits Nigerian mythology in the magical fabric. Adeyemi drew inspiration from novels like Harry Potter and Ember in the Ashes, West African mythology, and Yoruba culture and language. Zelzi, Zili was born of Magi, a person meant to wield the magic of the gods and the good of people of Orisha. But then she was a child. The king of Orisha ordered a raid that wiped out most of the Magi, including her mother, and subjugated those who were left, marked by their white hair and devoid of their powers. Magi and their families live in fear. Ameri and her brother Inan grew up in the luxury of the royal palace, far away from the suffering of the Magi. The king has raised his children to be cold and put to the good of Orisha themselves, at the expense of kindness and compassion. When a cruel act forces Amari to reassess what she has always accepted as truth, he flees to the palace with a scroll that may hold the power to restore the magic to Orisha. Now, like the similarly eagerly anticipated Black Panther movie, to which will undoubtedly draw comparisons, the proximity of the releases, Children in Blood, is a fast-paced, excellently crafted hero's journey in a fantasy nation that is informed by African mythology, specifically West African, in the case of the book, and populated with compelling and nuanced black characters. Um, the world is hungry for this, and Tommy Adeyemi delivers a worthy feast. So, as these people they become allies and journey across Orissa to unlock the power of gods and allow Magi reclaim their place in Orisha. But Inan is hot on their trail, eager to prove himself and to destroy magic forever. So magic, um, as in Harry Potter and the other texts, are very much imbued in a very real framework, as it were. So fantasy operates as not an out-of-the-world transcendent something, but distinct kind of narrative or language game. The authors here have tried to hint at the disproportionate realistic themes and perception. We do not divorce reality, but distort normal perceptive standards. The magical and the improbable operate together as the authors employ reality, but then withhold or distort it with the same totalizing, related but erratic efforts that shape fantasy. So this was my presentation, and I am sorry for the inconvenience that happened because I could not share my slides for some reason or the other. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dasgupta. Uh, your presentation is no doubt a very unique one. I ask the other participants, would you like to ask any question to him? Well, Dr. Dasgupta, does African fantasy literature has a distinctive character of its own? Would you like to say a few words about it?
Yes, surely. That's a very good question, sir. But I don't think so. But the answer is actually yes and no. Yes, because the African fantasy literature is more on the tracks of modern fantasy literature, recent fantasy literature, where myths have been made used of. But other than that, I have found I've tried to do some work on fantasy, and I found that fantasy is not a very remote, distant thing as some people envisage it to be, but it's just an extension of reality. And in fact, what is real and what is unreal are very interchangeable. Like this evening on Mohalaya, we are sitting here today and having this webinar. Maybe we could not think of it in a worst or best, in whatever way we put it, fantasies last year, or maybe 5-6 months left. The entire idea of webinars have come up because of this abnormality of the COVID situation. So the ideas of real and unreal, the abnormal and the abnormal, are very interchangeable, and they can be swapped for one for the other. So yes, it is in no way different from the other fantasy literatures that are produced over the world. But the use of myth, I feel myth and the African culture, and is much more prominent in African literature than maybe in other. That's it, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Dasgupta. Dr. Shorkar, would you like to ask anything?
Thank you, Dr. Anjan Dasgupta, for this excellent presentation. So we would have expected the PPT presentation that you are planning. Sir, can you
No,
just...
actually, I don't know why I could not. I will actually share it with you. I mean, I will share it with you. How can I do that? Should I mail it to you, or?
No, just now, just show us the slides. It would be great.
Yes, but how can I do that? I can do something. I'm here. I'm just trying to work on it. Let the next presenter do it. So what I can do is, since it's very small, means very few speakers are here, I can see. What I can do is after the session is over. I mean, after the next speaker, I'm getting the modalities back so that I can actually present. This is the slides that I can do. I can take just 1 or 2 more minutes to run.
Okay, thank you.
After, I mean, I'll put it in the chat box. Let me resolve it. Okay. After the next speaker does it.
Thank you. Now, as the list shows, I don't find any other candidate except Shumita. I think Rajatnath is just a participant. Rajatnath, are you a presenter? Rajatnath and Gargi, I find. I think you are just attending this.
Yes, sir. I'm just arranging this.
Yes. So Shumita happens to be the last speaker of today's session, as the list shows. So Shumita, please start your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. First, good afternoon to all. I'm Shumita Atto from PG 4th semester of Rishi Bankim Chandra College, Naihati. So I'm going to present my screen. Please let me know whether the screen is visible or not. Is my PPT visible, sir?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So here is the title of my paper, that is Chinua Achebe's Marriage is a Private Affair, whether the old order and the new relates to the issue of honor killing, post-colonial perspectives and the changes in tradition. In this paper, my primary objective is to give a clear insight into the Igbo culture in relation to the Western culture. Therefore, it sheds lights on the clash between modernity and tradition, as well as it explores the effect of the European customs and belief on traditional African culture. In addition to this, I will also draw attention to the European influence of the colonizers. While the tradition is a combination of social and cultural features characterizing African identity as well as the issue of honor. Hence, this paper investigates how Achebe depicts the clash between modernity and tradition in his short story. It will also focus on the effect of Western culture and thought on the Igbo society. It is worth noting that the colonizers want to impose Western values on the African's identity so that colonialism violently ruins African culture and tradition and imposes European forms of thought and social organization upon colonized people. Okay, so in this slide, by referring the characters, I am going to give a brief introduction and the substance of the story. Chinua Achebe's marriage is a private affair. Begins with Nene, the daughter-in-law of Okeke, asking Nameka, who is the son of Okeke, about their engagement, whether he has told his father. Though Nameka thinks that it would be better to have the conversation when he goes to visit with the village within 6 weeks. The story constructed around 3 such pairings that highlight the tension arising out of the intimate contact between European Christianity and traditional African society. Firstly, there is a generational pairing embodied in the father-son relationship between Okeke and Naiweka, symbolizes the old and the new orders. The second pairing between Lagos, the metropolitan site of colonial contact where the story opens, with Okeke's rural village home, the site of the traditional culture. And the third and final pairing is the gendered pairing of Nene, the educated urban professional Dechibalized, the modern Nigerian woman whom Naimika has chosen to marry, with Ugoi, the traditional Sama literate Igbo girl whom Okeke has chosen to marry with his son. The story's original title, The Old Order in Conflict with the New, alludes to a binary pairing of conflicting system of values dominating the story that Chinua Achebe wrote about the strict rules of marriage in his Igbo tribe in Africa. Intertribe marriage is forbidden in Igbo tribe, Igbo culture. Here, Achebe presents a conflict between a young man and his father over the conflict and the choice of bride outside the Igbo tribe. After all, the marriage is between Naimeka and Nene, not Naimeka, Nene, and Okeke. Naimeka seeks his father's approval for his engagement with Nene, but instead of happiness, met with disappointment and hostility, as his father disapproves of the marriage. Naimeka has a choice, the one whom he loves, because he has to spend the rest of his life with. And at the end of the day, as the title suggested or stated, that his marriage is a private affair. That here in this Igbo tribe or Igbo society, we can see that the senior family members determine the marriage of the juniors. And even today, we can find that strict religious rules and laws that no one can violate. And if anybody tries to go against the religion, they can even have the death penalty. Post-colonial literature deals with the distortions of the cultures by the influences of the colonization. The post-colonial writers exposed the appropriate images, scenes, traditions of the colonized countries, along with their problems, perplexities, complexities in the form of the otherness and independence. It has included a dilemma, chaos, belongingness, religious crisis, and dichotomies regarding the issues of identities, discrimination of race, political powers, and black consciousness to overcome on the colonial impact. As with the issues of identity and culture, a place has always been of great importance to post-colonial study, as it is related with the language, naming and narration. African writers use the English language as one of their legacies of colonialism to advantage. Post-colonial studies especially focuses attention on the nature of the influence of colonialism on the life and the culture of the colonized people. Thus, it highlights and addresses various issues like Orientalism, otherness, hybridity, cultural dimensions, so on and so forth. Hybridity is to mix between two different cultures. And hybridity can be regarded as a natural consequences of the interaction between two or more cultures and ideologies and etc. Homike Bhabha, in his The Location of Culture, includes various chapters which emphasizes different aspects of hybridization of culture. Bhabha also notes that hybridity should be viewed both from the perspective of the colonizers and colonized as well. That is to say, it is not only the natives who adopt and borrow the language and the culture of their colonial masters and incorporates them in their vernaculars, but the colonizers also borrow some words and expressions in their own language. Naimaka is an example of a hybrid identity. He respects his tradition and Igbo origins, as well as he respects to the Western values. The third and the final objective of my paper, that is the issue of honor killing, and more or less we are all familiar with this phenomenon, but still I would like to give a brief introduction of it and how marriage as a private affair relates to the issue of honor killing. So an honor killing or shame killing is the murder of the member of a family due to the perpetrator's belief that the victim has brought shame or dishonor upon the family or has violated the principle of a community or a religion with an honor culture. Here in this slide, we can see two posters. Left one is the Bollywood movie Dhadak, which is the remake of 2016 blockbuster Marathi movie Sairat, which is on the right side. Dhadak is based in Udaipur, Rajasthan, where a commoner boy falls in love with a politician's daughter. As intercaste love is taboo in India, so that they have to end their life by death penalty. In Chinu Achebe's story, Okeke did not accept his son's marriage. 6 months later, when receiving his son's wedding photograph, Okeke cuts off the bride's picture and sends it back again via snail mail because for him the daughter-in-law has never existed. Okeke neglects his son's decision and refuses to talk to him for 8 years, dishonoring him in a way, and isn't it in an indirect way of honor killing? After 8 years later, when he comes to know about his grandsons, he cannot resist keeping his heart hidden from the family any longer. And as the short story does not draw any conclusion line, so we can never know what will happen next, whether it would be just a visit to his grandson or it's a payback time by death penalty as happened in the movie Dhadak. To conclude, without any doubt, we can see that Chinua Achebe's short story "Marriage is a Private Affair" is a powerful example of the clash between traditional African culture and modern Western values. Through Naimaka's character analysis, Bhaba's concept of hybridity is expressed, and Marriage is a Private Affair portrays hybridity in terms of identity, religion, and society. In addition, Achebe points out effect of Western customs and values on the traditional Igbo society, and to some extent to the issue of honor killing. Thank you.
Thank you, Shumita.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. Well, as we find that marriage is still an issue in almost every society, isn't it? Even in today's India or in anywhere else, marriage becomes an issue, a contended issue, or controversial issue sometimes because of so many factors. So, do you think that the title has an ironic message, Shumita?
Yes, sir. The title is, of course, ironic because as
Shumita, please switch on your video. Appear.
Okay, sir.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, sir. I think the title is ironic because as we can see that that Naimaka who wants to marry an intertype who wants to marry the girl who is not from the Igbo tribe, and his father Okeke wants a girl Ugoi who is quite traditional and from his tribe. So that is and so that we can see that the title is of course ironic because both of them have different opinions about marriage.
Thank you very much. Well, any other question from anybody?
Thank you, Shumita Datta, for your excellent presentation analysis. So I would
Thank
like
you
to
so
know
much,
that how that English, so Western modernity has impacted upon this concept of honor killing. You refer to the Igbo tribe.
Yes, sir.
So what is the impact of Western modernity? Has it modernized it? So
Uh,
marriage is
I
a
think
private, yeah.
I think that the issue of honor killing, which I have referred to my paper, but this is which is relevant in India as well as to the Western culture, because in this text we can see the indirect way of honor killing, not the direct way we can see in the movie Dhadak, which I have referred, but also we can see that the indirect way of honor killing, so that to some extent it is relevant, right, sir?
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent handling of the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you,
so much.
sir.
আচ্ছা, anybody else? আর কেউ কিছু প্রশ্ন করবেন?
I can actually, I'm Anjan Dasgupta
Yes.
speaking. I can actually
yeah.
run through the slide.
Yeah. I saw that you are sharing this PPT slides.
Yes,
Dr.
yes,
Anjan
I-
Dasgupta, please.
Yes, actually.
Yeah,
Yes.
make a short presentation. Yeah. Start sharing again.
Yes. I think this is visible now.
Yes, it's sharing now.
Yes.
Actually, the issue is, to be very honest, I'm very, jittery with these things. My son does it for me, although he's only in class 7, but, he actually was sleeping. So I just called him up from his afternoon siesta, and he did it for me. There was this technical glitch. This is the first slide, which is I was trying to look up the issue, then trying to arrive at a definition of fantasy. This is the definition of Northrop Frye, which I was talking about. Then this is what Ian Foster was saying. Again, some definitions. This is a picture of the both Ben Okri and the book by Okri, The Famished Road. This is a picture of Wizard of the Crow, Akata Witch, which I have discussed in some detail. This is a scene from still from Zoo City, and then the write up. Children of Blood and Bone. It's quite Nigerian mythology and a magical, very much a model on Harry Potter, but quite different from Harry Potter, of course. I'm really sorry that at that time the thing was not working for some reason. Now it is. I was just the gesture that you have shown, that of allowing us to present once more, and it's really very nice, and there's a lot to learn from the organizers. Actually, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Dasgupta.
Dr. Dasgupta. Thank you, sir.
So we have almost come to the end of today's presentation session. But while inviting the presenters, I did just mention their name. So at the end, I like to say something more about them, at least their designation to be mentioned, and I like to sum up it in this way. So today we started with Dhimat Sangeeta Sunil. She is the Assistant Professor, Department of English, Padma Shri V.K. Patil College, Nagar, Maharashtra, India. And she spoke on contrast between African and British culture in Once Upon a Time by Gabriel O'Carroll. Next to him was Dipanjan Ghosh, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Navadip Vidyasagar College, Navadip, Nadia, West Bengal. Well, he spoke on Wool Soinker's Dance of the Forests, Crime, Punishment and Redemption. Thereafter, we had Dr. Anjan Dasgupta, Assistant Professor of English, Vijay Narayan Mahavidyalaya, Itachuna, Hooghly, and he spoke on interpreting African myths in The Famished Road, Wizard of the Crow, Akata Witch, Jew City, and Children of Blood and Bone, distortion of reality and reality as fantasy. And last, Shumita Dotto. She is our student, MA English, 4th semester, Rishi Bankim Chandra College, Noyati, North 24 Parganas, West Bengal, India. She spoke on Chinua Achebe's Marriage is a Private Affair, whether the old order and the new relates to the issue of honor killing and post-colonial perspective and changes in tradition. So we thoroughly enjoyed the presentations, and some of the presenters, they used visuals, and questions also came from Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar, and I too asked some questions. And overall, with the cooperation of all concerned, we could conduct the session very smoothly. Recording is going on, and I request Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar to say something on this occasion.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Chandranath Odhikari, Associate Professor, Rishi Bankim Chandra Evening College. Thank you for conducting this session so excellently. The presenters are there. So we come to a closure of this entire seminar process. The seminar was on African literature, orature, and culture. Most of the papers presented today were excellent, and I have already received the full papers. The papers will be published very shortly. Thank you, Professor Chandranath Odhikari, for this, for chairing this session and conducting this session so smoothly. So we don't have any questions anymore, no discussions. So can we draw a conclusion? Shumita Datta? Hello,
Yes,
Shumita
sir.
Datta, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
your
sir. Yeah.
vote of thanks to the chair.
Okay, okay, sir.
Again, video on.
Okay, sir. So just a minute. Mm. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and our honorable chairperson, Dr. Chandranath Odhikari, for chairing this session, and as well as I want to thank Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar for present here, as we all know that we didn't have the opportunity to have Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar in our previous session when this session actually conducted before. So without all these speakers, it would be impossible for us to conduct this webinar to successful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.
Hello. So now it is time for us to close the session. So we are leaving the screen, and before that we are stopping the recording process.